Welcome back. Now, in a moment, we'll examine the security of online banking. But first, here are some other stories to keep an eye on. Indian banks have reopened for the first time since a snap government decision to withdraw the country's two largest denomination notes from circulation. The move is meant to curb tax evasion and corruption, but it prompted queues at many banks as people try to exchange their old notes. Russian Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev is in Israel for the start of a three-day visit to the Middle East. During his tour, Medvedev is scheduled to meet Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu before travelling to the West Bank city of Jericho to meet Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. And Cuba has announced it will undertake military exercises in order to better prepare itself for what it calls a range of enemy actions. The drills, known as the Bastion Strategic Exercises, have occurred on 6 previous occasions and often follow times of high tension with the United States. Now, a bank here in the UK has suffered the country's most serious cyber attack to date, with 40,000 online accounts targeted. Tesco Bank has admitted more than £2.5 million has been stolen from customers. They're working with authorities to investigate the fraud. Needless to say, anyone who lost money is being compensated, but it's raised questions about the safety and security of online banking. Chloe Culpan reports for Insight.
Britain's first drive-in bank has just received its first customer. Arriving in municipal magnificence, the Lord Mayor of Liverpool cashes the first cheque.
Banks have always been on the lookout for novel ways to let customers get their cash. Back in 1959, it was the drive-through.
Besides convenience to motorists, the drive-in bank reduces the danger of a customer being waylaid while carrying large sums of money on foot.
Then came a ladies' bank.
An all-woman staff handles the affairs of the bank's all-women clients to a background of soft music, golden wallpaper and deep-piled carpets.
And in 1969, Chemical Bank in New York installed the first cash machine. And with the World Wide Web taking form in the late 80s and 90s, online banking wasn't far behind. More than half of UK and US adults now use it, but so do the criminals. Banks are targeted all the time, but usually only a small number of people are affected. Tesco Bank spotted suspicious activity on 40,000 accounts. 20,000 customers had money stolen, which is unprecedented. Tesco haven't said how much was taken, but it was forced to suspend parts of its online banking system.
Now for some this has meant hundreds of pounds, for others it's smaller amounts. So what we're saying is make sure that you're checking your accounts. They have sent text messages to the customers affected, but even if you haven't got a text, just double check.
Like most banks, Tesco employs hundreds of people to work round the clock in their cyber security team, a fact most of us put our blind faith in when using the applications.
I'm quite careful with it and stuff, so I don't think anything could go wrong.
I should imagine all of the safeguards are in place to prevent any fraud or cyber theft or anything like that, so at least one would expect that too.
In public I'm a bit more wary, but at home I don't have any problems.
I presume that they're safe to use. I also presume that if something goes wrong I'll be covered by the bank, but I don't know for sure.
Tesco and other banks have plenty of security features, like fingerprint sign-in, a code sent over text, but experts say we need to play our part to make it as difficult as possible for criminals to get at our money.
People need to take things into their own hands by making sure that they're doing the best thing they can to protect themselves. So for example, if it's passwords, make sure you don't have the same password for everything. Make sure that it's as complicated as possible. So by that I mean add numbers in there, add letters, add symbols. You can use certain things like a hashtag or whatever in there, which makes it more difficult to get hold of. Don't keep your passwords written down anywhere.
Tesco hasn't yet detailed how the hack took place, but however it happened, it's clear we need to be doing far more than just covering our PIN number at a cash point to keep our accounts secure. Chloe Culpan reporting for Insight.
Well, let's discuss this with Robert Carolina, who's the Executive Director at the Institute for Cyber Security Innovation. Good to have you with us, Robert. Obviously, this is very worrying. Do we know any more about how the cyber attackers managed to target these accounts?
Well, we're still waiting for details to emerge. A lot of that's being conducted as part of a criminal investigation. But it appears from the reporting that I've seen that we're looking at an example of a direct attack on a banking system, as opposed to an attack on depositors. And that's a critical distinction to draw. Many cyber thieves or many thieves try to persuade depositors to tell their bank to do something. That doesn't seem to be, this wasn't that type of attack. This is an attack where it seems that somebody has managed to subvert the bank's own security systems to try to move money.
So is there any evidence of a wider threat to the wider banking system, anyone who's got an online bank account? No,
not at all. And in fact, I'm even wondering if this is an online banking security problem at all. This may have been, we haven't had enough details out, but this may have been a question of money being diverted from accounts, whether or not there was an online account. So I don't think that people need to be particularly worried about this, because banks spend a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of effort to secure their systems, and banks remain responsible to their depositors for the money that they've taken into deposit.
But we do know that cyber attackers are also spending an awful lot of effort trying to get people to park with their money.
Sure.
Apparently losses from online banking fraud rose by 48% in 2014 compared with the year before. And I guess this is because more and more people are conducting their financial affairs online. And as you say, there are a lot of fraudsters out there trying to get you to give them sensitive information, which allows them to access your money.
And that is a completely different type of problem from the one that we appear to be seeing at Tesco. I mean, the type of problem where people try to persuade me to do bad things, there have been circumstances where a fraudster, for example, will convict a business person to say, send €500,000 to this overseas account because we're trying to close a deal or we're trying to make something happen. That's just straight up and down fraud. The online banking system or the banking system has nothing to do with that. That's just a good old-fashioned, so people have been doing it for centuries, fraud.
So different types of attack on accounts. We also have different means of paying for things. For example, there's now Apple Pay and other kinds of smartphone payments. And the one that's particularly worrying to a lot of people is contactless card payments. Apparently there are scanners out there, which if people stand close enough to you, they can get your details, get your card details, or even skim money off your account. Is that true?
Well, there are demonstrated attacks which theoretically might be able to do that under some very limited circumstances. But contactless payment methods are based on various type of cryptography, which makes it difficult to simply grab data and then use it again. It has to be done almost in real time. Now that's different, for example, from what happens when people try to steal your debit or credit card number. Someone steals those details, they're persistent data. So once you have that string of digits, once you have all the relevant information, the fraudster can try to take money from your account tomorrow or next week or next month. But with the contactless, it has to be almost instantaneous in order to work, because there's a wonderful sort of set of authentication protocols going on inside the technology. And that's the sort of third type of attack that we're talking about now. And that's where somebody pretends to be me in an effort to get the bank to do something. Now, traditionally, that was done by stealing credit card numbers. Now we've got all these other types of authentication attack. And who's responsible for those? It kind of depends on how careful you were with your own materials.
I think the worry for a lot of people is that as we become more sophisticated in how we carry out our financial transactions, it also becomes more remote, more tech-driven, and people have this perception that that's easy to intercept, that there's data flying through the air online, and that can be taken by a third party. So just how good are security systems?
The answer is very, very good indeed. And speaking personally, I have much more confidence in contactless payment systems than I do in card number systems.
But these skimming machines do exist, and in fact there's been research done. For example, the UK Cards Association shows that in 2014 the total annual contactless loss was £153,000. Now I know that's a relatively small amount compared to the couple of billion that was spent on them,
yes.
But it's still substantial. If you're the person who's lost 30 quid off your contactless card.
They say that the money has been lost, but I don't know if that loss is then attributed to the customer. Under normal banking rules, losses like that are made good by the banks. That's the deal we have as consumers who deal with banks, and that's the deal that banks make with their depositors, is that we will keep your money safe. And up to certain limits and under certain circumstances, so long as we abide by the rules of the system that they set out, they make good the loss. So there's a big difference. I mean, in the Tesco situation, I would disagree, for example, with a statement you made earlier where you said that money was stolen from customers. It wasn't. Money was stolen from the bank.
But those customers had their accounts targeted. That's what they're worried about.
But their money,
it's semantics,
but
whether it's the bank or...
I'll tell you the difference between semantics and reality. The reality is the money's still available to them. The reality is, if they go to get the money, it's still there. The reality is when they walk up to the teller and they say, give me my £100, the £100 come across.
They're not going to put the money
That's not semantics, that's reality.
Is vulnerable to attacks.
Of course not.
And you obviously work for cybersecurity innovation. Presumably, the security measures are also becoming more sophisticated as our banking habits become sophisticated.
Well, we have a continuing running battle. It's a bit of an arms race, as it always has been through history. People come up with more security devices, bad guys come up with different ways to try to subvert them or get around them or overcome them in some way.
It was ever thus.
It was ever thus.
How do you persuade people like my mum, though, who refuse to bank online because they're worried about cyber thieves?
I wouldn't try to persuade her. I mean, if somebody's not comfortable with it, then don't do it. People need to be comfortable with the banking mechanisms that they use. And in fact, sometimes things go wrong because people start using a mechanism or a channel that they're not comfortable with. Unless someone kind of understands what they're dealing with or how the system works for them, then perhaps that's not right for them. There's still a big role for traditional old-fashioned banking methods, including going into a real teller and asking for real cash.
Sure, and I guess knowing how it works is the best road to safe practices. Robert, really great to speak with you. You've reassured me. Thank you very much indeed for that. Robert Carolina there. Now, we end with our Insight Bite, a little something that we feel you should know. And this time, it's supermoons. A supermoon occurs when the full moon makes its closest pass to the Earth. If you haven't seen one before, don't worry. The next supermoon event is set to happen on Monday. It's going to be the closest and most spectacular since 1948. Scientists say there won't be another one like it until 2034. NASA are advising anyone who's interested to head out just after sunset to see it at its peak. And that's all for now. I'm Shuli Ghosh. That was Insight.